from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and his PhD in Applied Linguistics from the University of California, Los Angeles. Dr. Shin's research interests include L2 assessment, language program evaluation, standard setting, L2 fluency development, statistical analysis for language study, and most importantly for today, web-based language teaching and testing. We at CeLCAR know Dr. Shin very well, as he has for the past 5 years been the center's language testing specialist, directing our online proficiency testing project. You'll hear us refer to it as PTP, working with our developers to create multi-level proficiency guidelines and testing materials for the less commonly taught languages of Central Asia. We're thrilled and honored that he has agreed to speak today about his work on using e-portfolios for foreign language teaching and learning. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Sun-Young Shin.
Can you hear me? Okay, so first of all, thank you for having me, and I'm really my great privilege to be here with all the renowned scholars in the areas of CAL. So today's talk is about the e-portfolios for foreign language assessment context. These days, a lot of people are concerned about some negative consequences of standardized tests. So people now start looking for some alternative assessment tools to replace standardized tests. But among them, there are a lot of options. Conferences, e-portfolios, or role plays. But among all these alternative assessment tools, e-portfolios have received a lot of attentions because e-portfolios are known to make teaching and learning and assessment more closely integrated and providing some kind of a complete package of individualized support and guidance for learners, and also help the teachers and the students to monitor their progress against some kind of existing language proficiency scales like CFR scales or the AFL guideline scales. And also help people to record the wide range of evidence of language learning. So it has a lot of potentials. But it has a lot of the drawbacks that we need to think about, and also is kind of in infancy now. So a lot of foreign language teachers are not really sure about how they could implement or use it for their language classrooms. So today I'd like to talk a little bit about some general basic concepts and procedures related to assessment in general and e-portfolios, and what kinds of language samples can be put together and assembled in the e-portfolios. And also there's some existing available e-portfolio models like the ELP, European Language Portfolio, and the Lingofolio, and the Global Language Portfolio. So I'll talk a little bit about those existing portfolios. But unfortunately, there are some limitations to use those portfolios for assessment purposes. So I'll talk about what the limitations are, and then what kind of recommendations we can make to overcome those limitations. First of all, well, again, so I want to make it a little bit more interactive. So if you have any questions, just feel free to jump in, but obviously not physically. But if you have any questions, just, you know. So let me just start with the simple questions to you. So when you see this word testing, what would be the very first thing that comes to your mind? Testing. Is that probably you kind of associate with, yes, listening, okay. Yeah, so that's kind of a teacher's perspective of testing. quiet, okay? Don't make any noise. Don't bother me. Martha? Okay, there you go. Fear and anxiety, right? That's kind of a lot of people kind of associate with the word testing. Bing Bing, you have some association with the word testing? Nervous, there you go. So yeah, so people are really kind of nervous about taking a test. So we kind of have some negative connotation with the word testing, right? So so a lot of our kids are really stressed about and anxious about the testing. So some schools like kind of have a whole the pre-testing activities, or what you call the testing pep rally before the test. So I could play this. Yes, very short, the video that I found.
Say, get your number 2 pencils out. Your number 2 pencils out. Get your number 2 pencils out. What the test?
So yeah, what the test say? Yeah, we probably do not need I didn't know that taking a test is amazingly fun like this. Would you want to take a test now for fun? Well, I'm a tester. I specialize in language assessment, but even myself, I don't want to take a test. I like to give a test, but I don't want to take the test. So so people really don't want to take a test, and they have a lot of nervous about the test. But so why do we give a language test to our students, right? We even have a kind of a testing pep rally to pump them up before the test. But why? Why? That's the kind of a question you always have to ask. It doesn't matter using a portfolio or multiple tests or dictation, whatever. This is kind of very first questions you may want to ask. Why do we give a language test to our students? Well, we make decisions about students in programs or institutions. So that's why we want to give our tests to students, right? So that's the main reason. And then the actually ultimate purpose of making decisions about students or programs or institutions, we want to bring about some potential and beneficial outcomes or consequences for our stakeholders, including students, parents, teachers, and administrators. So this is the way the process of developing tests. So we need to think about what kind of consequences we want to bring about, right? And then to achieve such positive consequences, we often make some decisions about our students or teachers or programs, institutions. And to make such kind of a good decisions about them, we need to make some valid interpretations about usually students' language abilities. And where their interpretation come from is from the student scores or on the assessment task. So this is the way we develop assessment. And the opposite way is the way we interpret and use our test scores, right? So students perform an assessment task like oral interview, and then we make judgment about their performance, either give you hey, I think you're novice high, I think you're intermediate low. So we make we assign some scores to them, and then based on score, we make interpretations, right? And then we make decisions about them. So you pass or fail, you could move on to the next level, you have to stay in this level, unfortunately, something like that. And then we hope that those kind of decisions actually bring about some positive consequences to the programs or each individual or institutions. So actually this part, the top 3 parts related to kind of a validity, and these two, the color is really distinct to you, but this related to appropriateness of score use interpretations, right? So we kind of assume that the e-portfolio is more valid assessment tool. So we kind of make a better interpretation about their true language abilities. And then so that we can make better decisions about them, and hopefully those decisions actually bring about some positive consequences of them. But then ePortfolio has a problem with the reliability, right? Because students put we have a lot of actually some more specific guidelines, but students usually put their old works, and then teachers make some kind of usually subjective judgment. So there's some issues with the reliability, but people think that those kind of alternative assessment, including ePortfolio, is more valid than traditional assessment tool. Okay, so whatever assessment tool you have, there are three major functions they like to serve. So one is the facilitated learning. So you could use tests for some formative purposes. So you could measure how much they have achieved, and then you could actually motivate them. And then you could also use the test score to facilitate teachings, right? So you could actually use the test score as kind of a feedback, the efficiency of your teaching. And in many cases, you could use tests for summative purposes, right? So you could use test score to grade, rank, and select students on teams. Okay, so now, what is portfolio? This is like the topic of this talk, right? So portfolio is kind of a collection of students' works, right? And into a box or folder, so that can be reviewed by other stakeholders later. Right? But what is electronic portfolio or e-portfolio? Again, it's another type of portfolio, but we we collect, select students' works, and we put them in the multimedia types, right? So anybody have some kind of the access. They could actually look at the students' works, and they could monitor their progress. And the one thing unique about electronic portfolio, it has some hypertext links. So anybody has some kind of password or whatever, and then they could actually share the work with other people. So that's what electronic portfolio is. Students put their works in the electronic the folder. Okay. So what are the benefits of portfolio? Obviously, it could allow us to look at the ongoing, some cumulative recorded language development. And also we could get some about their individual progress. And we could get the tangible and shareable evidence. So I'm sure that you have a test report and you just got the numbers. Or sometimes you have just like one sentence description about your performance. But in portfolio, you could actually see that their students' language performance, right? So that's really a beauty of a portfolio too. And it's promote learner autonomy. That's another important benefits of a portfolio. How is possible? Because students always evaluate their works on their own using like student self-assessment, and they also set their own goals. So through that, the goal setting and the student self-assessment, the portfolio is also kind of enhanced learner autonomy too. But there's a disadvantage of portfolios too, obviously. The major problem of a portfolio or a portfolio is very time-consuming and labor-intensive. So it requires extra time to conduct, and involves some like a subjective evaluation, like I said before. And holding conference is critical in a portfolio or portfolio assessment process. So it's very time-consuming, labor-intensive. But like it just Medical said, that we have a problem with the low enrollment in many LCTL programs. So sometimes this is not a really issue in LCTL because we don't have large enrollment. So I think it has a lot of potentials to be used in LCTL programs. Okay, there are a couple different types of portfolios. There are three main different types of portfolio. One is a showcase portfolio, a working portfolio, and assessment portfolio. And showcase portfolio, or bachelor portfolio, as its name says, it's just the primary function of a showcase portfolio is to demonstrate the highest level of achievement attained by students. So students actually can choose and select and store their best works, right? Usually the writing samples are commonly selected and stored, but other student works can be selected and stored, like a list of books students have read, or their best oral presentations, so video clips, testimonials. So you could actually include those kind of works into the showcase and bachelor portfolio. This is actually used by a lot of music students and art students, right? They want to choose their only best works, and they show them to their potential employers, right, to impress them. In language learning context, this is used a lot in the K-12 context. So, they do a lot of activities, and then they collect the best works, and then they usually show it to their parents or relatives. So it's very common practice in K-12 context. The process or working portfolios is like a collection of the work in progress, right? So like in a writing, students usually go through different revisions, and they put the first revision draft or second revisions, and then the final draft. So you could actually see that their progress in this portfolio. So this is kind of a holding tank for the works that can be selected and collected later for the display portfolio. So this is actually teachers and students can actually review and monitor their progress together. And then teachers can now identify their strengths and weaknesses of students learning the progress. And they can talk about it, and then they think about what are the best way to improve on certain areas. Okay, finally, assessment portfolios. So portfolios can be used for some assessment purposes. So, but these portfolio raise a lot of the practical and technical issues, because teachers tend to give very subjective, impressionistic scores. But if portfolios to be used for high-stake decisions, the teachers need to come up with a very reliable scoring systems, and they need to be really well calibrated. So I'll talk a little bit more about the assessment portfolios later. Okay, so what are the steps involved in developing and implementing portfolio development? First, we need to start with defining what is the purpose of this portfolios, right? And then you need to explain well to the students and the purpose of portfolio, whether you use portfolio for showcase or working portfolio or assessment portfolio. You have to make it really crystal clear. And then you need to think about define the audience for the portfolio. So who will have an access to your portfolios, right? Parents or other future employers, or so you have to clarify those two. And then these are the 4 important questions you have to ask. So what kind of work are kept in portfolios, and how much work should be kept, and when and how often is put together, and where to keep portfolios. Okay, now these are more specific guidelines for using portfolios interactively in a language classroom. Is J.D. Brown came up with these questions. So have you introduced explain portfolios to students? Have your students decided who will take responsibility for what? This is, I think, very important questions in any kind of portfolio assessment. Sometimes students do not know what to do, and then teachers do not know what to do. So at the end of the class, then there are no works collected, or works kind of collected in a very haphazard way. So you have to kind of clarify the responsibility. So who will need to do this, who will need to do that. So the students collect the meaningful work, and make sure that the works are periodically reflected. And it's also important to make sure that the other students' peers or teachers have an access to those portfolios and can be examined periodically. And if you want to score them, do you have like a reliable scoring system, either holistically or analytically? Okay, now this is really important questions you may have, right? So I know that portfolio has good potentials and have a really help us to monitor their progress. What can be included in portfolio, right? So the writing sample. So if you teach students how to write in foreign languages, you could have some of their writing samples. For example, like you could have some examples using the prompt-based writing, so like a postcard or email, right? So you write a postcard or email to your target pencil telling about your own ways, right? And you have to write less than 50 words. You have 30 minutes, and also you could ask them to write an invitation letter or whatever. So these are like the possible tasks you could give to your students, but you need to give us some comments about their performance, right? So these are the possible criteria you want to use to evaluate their performance in writing. So content, organization development is really well organized, and the idea is it flows well, smoothly. And obviously this is a language use example, so you want to give us some comment about their grammar, grammatical accuracy, and the vocabulary, the reach in terms of lexical range and accuracy, and some other mechanical issues. Speech samples. There are two different types of speech samples. It could be like a monologic task or a dialogic task. So you could have some kind of a monologue task, like prompt-based oral task, or you could have some kind of a role play or interview. So for monologic tasks, you could have like what was the best present you ever received, and then you could ask something a little bit like a argumentative type of oral response. You might want to ask this kind of question: do you agree or disagree? Games are important. But what do you think about using games for adults? Do you agree or disagree with examples? So what kind of criteria could you use for speech samples? Obviously, the very first thing you want to make comment on is pronunciations, right? So in terms of the segmentals, right? The students have appropriate vowel and consonant sound, or you want to also give some comment about super segmentals as well. Do they have a good intonation and pitch in their speech? And you also make a comment about their grammar, some vocabulary, and the fluency is also very important in speech samples. Right? Make sure that they have not to have a lot of unfilled pauses. The speech speed is appropriate, and so also it's not really measurable in monologic tasks, but in dialogic tasks, you can also tell that whether they could comprehend and understand the questions they receive. Okay, so these are the examples about the interview example that I got from ESL students. Amber, could you play this over here? Yeah, just take the.
And that?
No, the next. Okay.
Sorry, I don't see a.
Yeah. Let's see.
Usually.
Anyway, so yeah, there's examples, but I kind of imitate to the Chinese student here. So the interviewer says, so why here in Bloomington right now? And the most important thing is for studying. The last thing is second, America is very beautiful. I can see many beautiful things. I like to take a photo. I want to study here. I want to get more information, do my best. And what do I want to study? Finance. Finance. I know it's very difficult. Why it's difficult? And well, my friends, blah blah. And then capital business is how you say finance is very difficult. So why is it difficult? Asking to ask questions. And then It is what is actually the teachers, the homework, the subjects. Maybe a subject for school or something else. Well, what have you had a chance to do Bloomington since you arrived? Like this, this is the school, very good. And I checked in the internet, says Bloomington, blah, blah, and the most beautiful school. So that's, actually, you have to listen to the actual dialogue, which is a lot of fun. But, okay, so then, let's assume that you have this kind of.
There it goes.
Okay, thanks. So, why are you here in Bloomington right now?
First, the most important thing is for studying, and the last thing is the second is because the America is very beautiful, and I can see many beautiful things, and I like to take photos.
Okay.
And I want to study here, and I want to get more information, and I will do my best.
Okay.
What do you want to study?
Maybe finance,
Finance.
but I know it's very difficult.
Well, why is it very difficult?
As my friends who study here told me that Cali School of Business is very how to say finance is very difficult, and
Did they say anything specific that is
yeah.
that makes it difficult? What makes it difficult?
Is it, what is it exactly? Is it the teachers, the homework, the subjects?
Maybe the subjects or school or something else.
Okay.
Well, what have you had a chance to do in Bloomington since you've arrived?
First, I like this. The school is very beautiful, and I checked in the internet, and it says the Bloomington is more is and the most beautiful school.
Yes, yeah. IU has a really beautiful campus, right? So, what you could do with this, actually, after this interview, you obviously record this interview, and then ask them to transcribe what you just said, right? And then, so that will kind of increase the awareness of their linguistic problems. So then you probably give a comment, one by one, in terms of the criteria that I just talked about. And then you could actually, like, you could do oral interview like in a week 1, and then you could do like a week 4, a week 8, and then you could actually see their progress. So that's kind of one way to do that. When you do have an oral interview, here's a kind of do's and don'ts. This is, you may think that is very commonsensical, but a lot of teachers make a mistake while they're doing oral interview. So during the oral interview, make sure that you kind of press for details, right? Sometimes students do not respond to your questions in detail, then you have to kind of press for details. And these are a lot of things that teachers make a mistake, and they tend to ask a lot of yes/no questions or too narrow questions. Then students have no choice but to like respond very shortly. So you have to come with some kind of a like more open-ended questions. And then sometimes teachers they really got carried away and with the students and they talk really too much. There is ends up being a chit-chatting, not oral interview. So you have to make sure that you don't speak too much. You elicit a lot of student speech samples as possible. Okay, now, so that was kind of a dialogic speaking task, like the interview between students and the teacher. Also, you could have some monologic speaking tasks. So, for example, you could ask students, what are your childhood dreams? But since this is e-portfolio, you could ask them kind of a kind of the video clip that can model their performance. So Amber, could you play this? I hope you will. Yes. So what were my childhood dreams? You may not agree with this list, but I was there. Zero gravity, playing in the National Football League, authoring an article in the World Book Encyclopedia. I guess you can tell the nerds early. Being Captain Kirk. Anybody here have that childhood dream? Not at CMU. I wanted to become one of the guys who won the big stuffed animals in the amusement park, and I wanted to be an Imagineer. Right? These are not sorted in any particular order, although I think they do get harder except for maybe the first one. So students actually can watch this, so they could actually model their performance. And then they respond to, yeah, if you just go and click the, yes.
What were my childhood dreams? In my memory of childhood, my dream was not special. Many people asked me, what do you want to be? What is your dream? I had no idea at that time. So I said, my dream is being a scientist. At that time, scientist was a normal answer to the question for young boys. Actually, I didn't like to study, and I didn't like science also. I just wanted to hang out with my friends. Without specific dreams, I had grown up. One day when I was a high school student, I seriously asked myself, what do I want to be? What do I like to do? At the time, the answer was also normal. My dream was being an office worker.
So this is the actual students' response to the questions we gave. So now the teachers actually listen to the students' this response to the questions, and then teachers actually record their feedback orally, right? So and this time again, students can actually transcribe what he or she said, and then you could actually listen to the teacher's feedback, and then like the following weeks, and he could redo this again, and then see actually the progress before and after. Okay. So listening samples also possible. So we just talked about what are the possible samples we could include in productive skills, but also receptive skills like listening and reading in portfolios can be used. So you could actually build a library of videotape local, national, international news broadcasts. So you could have a lot of the listening text available, but I found that the Voice America one is pretty useful. So you could actually go to this website, or you could actually just give this the link to the students, and then students could go and they actually choose the best the listening file they want to listen to. And then obviously you need to like define the criteria you want to use to evaluate that student's listening performance. And then you want to give some worksheet and then discussions, questions, and ask them to complete the portfolio recorder later. So these are the possible kind of rubrics you may want to use for listening tasks. So students listen to that the listening file, audio files or video files, and then you can ask about, so what is the main idea questions, what is the tone, and then just kind of integrated task, right? You could ask them to summarize what you just listened to, and then you could also have some like vocabulary tasks to write down the 5 words. So this is a very generic questions that can be used for any kinds of listening or audio file. You could have like You could have the same scores, or you could have like some weighted scores. It's up to you as students. And a reading sample is also possible. The beauty of a portfolio is in assessing or reading ability is that students can choose the reading text they like to read. It's a kind of like extensive reading approach. So, and then you could actually use kind of a text bank later, right? But you could actually ask some very generic questions that you answer to. And then like a week later, and they could actually talk about or write about their readings and they're shared with their classmates. Okay, so those are like the possible language samples you may want to include for your portfolio. And these are the steps that you want to follow to use portfolio for assessment tool. But first of all, you have to make sure that you have a good solid management systems, and you have to decide whether you're going to use the commercially available portfolio tool, or you could even use like your classroom management tool. Like for example, at IU, the Canvas has e-portfolio options. I'm not sure about the Encore, but now Canvas have e-portfolio. So you could use like the classroom management tool, and you have to make a judgment call at the beginning. And then you have to come with some reliable scoring systems, right? Which can be holistic or analytic depending on the purpose of your portfolio. And then, like I said before, whatever assessment tool you use, you got to make sure that your assessment tool is reliable and valid. So you have to check on the quality of your portfolio. Okay. So at the stage 1, developing management systems, you have to decide whether you go by commercially available portfolio or Canvas. And then think about how you organize, how you structure your portfolio. Because structure portfolio based on the language skills, like a reading folder, or listening folder, or writing, or speaking, or integrated folder. Or you could also structure it in thematic or curriculum-based, or the SLO, student learning outcome-based. Or you could just simply like chronologically order the portfolios. So it's like week 1, week 2, week 3, week 5. So I think it's up to you. But rubrics for scoring portfolios, again, is depending on portfolio types or functions. The most common rubric is a checklist type, so like a can-do statement. So for example, can ask and answer questions about habits and routines, can ask and answer questions about pastimes and past activities. And then you could like, well, students can do alone or with some assistance, or students cannot do at the moment. So you could just like checklist. Also, you could give like some more test-specific trait-based rubrics. So the example that I show you is more like this. So you could have more detailed comments about their language. So like you make comments on fluency, pronunciation, or grammar, or vocabulary. But that's one option that you could choose. And then since this is not traditional assessment, and you got to make sure that you have to involve students in a very active way. So before you decide on your assessment rubrics, I think it's a good idea to have some kind of a like conversation or discussion with the students, and you have to work together on the rubrics. So this is the task we're going to use, and then what kind of things that you want to have in the rubrics. So you have to kind of involve. But analytic scoring, you give like scores for each aspects of language. So you give separate score for grammar, vocabulary, or fluency, or pronunciation, if you have a speech sample. Or you could actually try with this empirically derived in binary choice or boundary definition scale, what you call the EBD scales. So what you do is like you this is very task-based rubrics. So you have a group of teachers or raters, and then you read through, if it's writing samples, you read through students, the group of students' samples, and then decide the best, not best, good or bad, right? So you make a binary decisions, and then you talk about what make distinctions between good or bad writing. You come up with the one sentence, right? So that's like boundary definitions. And then among the good ones, and you could actually subdivide into like a better or like worse, something like that. And then you come up with the one sentence that like distinction between better or worse. Right? So the example is like if you have a 4-point scale for writing, the very first questions would be 10 lines or more, right? So the length is very important in writing. So if students write more than 10 lines, you get yes, right? And then for yes, is everything clear? So it's about the development of the organization questions. If the answer to this question is yes, you give 4. If it's no, it's 3, right? It's on topic, you get 2. If it's off topic writing, you get 1, right? So this is like very like kind of an easy way for the raters to judge the students' performance on certain tasks. But the limitation of this skill development is very time-consuming at the beginning. But I found that teachers kind of better understanding of the rubrics, and once they're really calibrated and trained, they have, I think, a higher interrater reliability among them. Okay. Like I said, since this ePortfolio is an assessment tool, we want to make sure that the ePortfolio is also reliable and valid. So I assume that you already know reliability, but some kind of to refresh your memory. So this is, I think, I found it really like good illustrations to explain the difference between reliability and validity. So reliability is a consistency of test scores across different settings, right? So students should get consistent scores whether they take the test in day 1 and day 2 or day 3. Whereas validity is about whether our judgment is well targeted, is appropriate, right? So look at this one. This is all over the place. It's not consistent. It's all off target. So it's not reliable, not valid, right? This one, all the arrows are in the same place. And that place is the bullseyes, right? Okay, so now it's reliable and valid. But this one is a little trickier one, right? You got very consistent, but it's really off target, right? So that's reliable, but not valid, right? So think about like the difference between reliability and validity is reliability is consistency of scores, right? But validity is about the way we interpret and use the test scores. So if you could use like a driving license test score for placement decisions for your legacy programs. You say, huh? But it's a very reliable test, right? The driving license test is very reliable. The reliability would be like 0.999, something like that. But it's very invalid, right, for your specific interpretation and use. I just see the sign that I have only 5 minutes left, so I can quickly go through the rest of the part. So to enhance reliability, make sure that you have some kind of balanced judgment. So you have like multiple judges, like teachers, and you also involve students or like peer assessment. And to make sure that when you develop the rating scales, it's a good idea to show them representative samples. So students have a better idea what my work should be. Okay. So portfolio assessment process, you have include like a multiple assessment, the bodies, student self-assessment, and then this is very important. You have like conferences, hold the conferences to make sure that students are really understand the process of a portfolio assessment. So this is summary. I won't repeat this. I'll just skip to the other sections. So like I said, there are 3 possible existing e-portfolio tools. European Language Portfolio, this is the most commonly used. Lingofolio is the American version of ELP, but it's only used for K-12 context. The Global Language Portfolio is the university version of Lingofolio. And these are based on ACPO guidelines, but it's based on CFR guidelines. Okay, so e-portfolio, European Language Portfolio is based on CFR. And CFR, I'm sure you're familiar with the CFR, is kind of proficiency scale instead of 6 different levels. So you rate from A1 to C2. But don't be fooled that A means beginner, not advanced, right? So they have the bands of the scales to represent different proficiency levels. This is very important, and the Lingofolio or Global Language Portfolio, they have all the same required elements, like its passport and biography or dossier. So language passport, that's kind of a summary of L2 linguist identity and language learning experiences. I'm not sure if you can see well. So in the first section is the language passport. So it has the student's language identity, what kind of foreign language they can speak, what are their overall proficiency levels of those languages. So that's what we call the language passport, right? So students can carry the passport and show them to the employers or other future stakeholders. And then the language biography is kind of a summary of their language competence. So they actually have this kind of a checklist. It's more detailed information about what they can do in languages. So like they have descriptors for each skills. And then finally, the dossier is really important, right? This is the collection of students' works, right? So those are the 3 obligatory components of the existing portfolio tools. Okay. But what are the limitations of existing portfolios? And obviously, it's too heavily reliant on self-assessment. So sometimes people make a lot of just subjective judgments. So look at this. I can express reactions, emotions. This actually exactly came from the Lingofolio checklist. I can express frustrations. Student may say yes, and this is a goal. Students actually can check off and next to that the descriptions. So a student might say like, well, I can express my frustration, like say, darn it. So it's, yes, I can do it, right? But that could be misleading, right? So that's why you need to have the conferences with the teachers to make sure that what you mean by express frustrations. And there are also other problems. I don't want to really talk a little bit more about that, but some like issues about mostly related to the self-assessment tools. So we'll skip that. So what are the recommendations I'd like to make to overcome those limitations? Just focus on communicative language competence, not what they can do. Think about their language qualities. Also, you want to think about the describe and characterize the task, because a lot of the level descriptors used in CFR and ACPO, there are a lot of things that are kind of confounded, like topics and tasks and language abilities all confounded together. So sometimes I thought it's useful to make some kind of distinctions using this kind of a grid. So you could actually characterize tasks you're giving to students in terms of these dimensions. So this is actually published in my paper in a recall in 2013. So you could actually read this later in more detail if you're interested. Okay, so another recommendation is like sometimes the students' works include some rehearsability, so they actually do it at home with some assistance from parents or other students. So if you want to make a distinction between unrehearsed performance and rehearsed performance, you may want to have a different folder in a portfolio so that actually can include those different performance in different folders. So these are, I think, the future research agenda you may be interested in. So how is it the self-assessment can-do statement can be related to the trait-based self-assessment? And I think it's a very interesting question. So students get feedback and how those kind of feedback improve their the subsequent performance. And then to what extent Norway learners' diversity is different from the other abilities. So these are the kind of recommendations I like to make. As you can see that e-portfolio has a lot of limitations, but I think has a really good potential. And this is the test. We do not need to give us a kind of a testing pet rally for the test. Okay, thank you. That's running out of time, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, we have 10 minutes for questions and
Yes.
answers.
I want to take this just in a bit of a different direction. Could you tell us, with students that are using this kind of model, give us maybe a case study of an exceptional student where they have really thrived because of this experience? And maybe juxtapose that with a student that found this challenging.
Oh, okay. So I can't recall any kind of a case study about using the e-portfolio, especially like the language assessment context. But I assume that a little bit low-level students would be really challenged to do this, because we are kind of trying to this e-portfolio assessment system in our intensive English program at IU here. But our low-level students is really low. They couldn't understand even instructions, so they're not quite sure what should be included, and obviously they cannot self-assess their performance. So for low-level students, not really kind of hesitant to force this assessment tool, but the higher-level students, I think, have a lot of potential. It really increased their learner autonomy. But I have not done any kind of my own case study on this issue. But I think those studies would be really fruitful for us to better understand how this system works from the perspective of students, not just from our teachers. Any other questions? Yes?
So I'm wondering why it has to be student assessed rather than teacher assessed. I mean, I did participate in something, I guess, kind of similar in an Arabic language class where we had it wasn't an online portfolio, it was just a folder of our work over the semester, and we did go in and meet with the professor at the end of the semester to, he actually went over the work in a fairly brief period of time, but, he looked over it and gave us the grade right there. Does this kind of assessment, I mean, why should it necessarily be student assessed rather than teacher assessed? If like you're talking about with smaller classes, you can maybe have more involvement from the teacher in assessing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned this before in my talk here. So you should have multiple voices about their performance, right? Obviously, teachers should go through their works and they have to give a comments on it. But self-assessment is kind of one element that distinguishes e-portfolio assessment from other traditional assessments. But if you want to use portfolio for making some kind of a high-stake decisions or summative decisions, you may use the student assessment result as kind of a supplement to the teacher assessment result. So teachers should evaluate students' works, obviously. But I want to emphasize that we have to ask students to evaluate themselves, because that's kind of the primary function of this e-portfolio assessment. Okay, so thank you. Right, I hope you enjoyed the rest of the talk.
Okay, so